So we have a disclaimer tonight. So thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight's presentation was prepared by our guest speaker, T.M. Garrett, based upon his personal story, his work helping people exit extremism and preventing work with youth and work prevention with youth. Please be advised that some of this content may be offensive or disturbing. The opinions expressed are his own and do not reflect the views of Respond to Racism. Tonight's community meeting is being recorded and will be available upon our website probably in a week or two. So please mute your mic to avoid disrupting the recording and also to be respectful to the speaker. For those of you who would enjoy having closed captioning, the directions are as stated there. Just click on the live transcript button below, and then you can adjust the font that way. Okay. So, Willie Poinsett, let's get the show on the road.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our community program, our community meeting. We're very happy to have you join us tonight. We are about education, and so tonight we have an exciting program, and I'm sure you'll be get a lot out of it. Get educated in a field that you may or may not know. Okay, John Barbara is here. He's going to do our land acknowledgement. John wears many hats, and tonight he is not, I was starting to make a joke, John, so I think I will hold it and let you get along. Get on. Go ahead.
Today, I would like to honor the people whose lands we live on, the Molalla, the Cayuse, and the Tualatin Kailapuya, Willamette Tumwater, Wasco Wishram, Clackamas Chinook, and the other Chinook people of the Willamette area. We acknowledge them as the original habitants of the land and recognize we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. Land acknowledgements are more than just explanations, name-checking the tribes and native nations whose lands we occupy. These statements help demonstrate respect for and awareness of the enduring relationship between indigenous people and place. Acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical contents. Colonialism is a current, ongoing process, and it behooves us to seek and build an understanding of our present participation. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Our mission for Respond to Racism is to educate and empower Lake Oswego residents and institutions with the tools to combat racism in all its forms and make LO and Oregon a better place to live for residents of all races and ethnicities. And for those of you who are not from Lake Oswego, we are wanting you to get better educated about race relations, and to empower you to really fight a battle that we have out here in our country and in other countries, but particularly here in our country, the racial war is still on. And now I'm going to give you some work to do. We're going to have our first poll of the night. And we ask you to please participate in our polls. How did you hear about tonight's session? And pick only one, please. Okay. All right. Thank you. You all can see the results of the poll. Our monthly programs and all of our activities don't just happen. There are lots of people behind the scenes and lots of people who are making it happen. Last community meeting speaker was a poet from New York, Serena Yang, and we really thank her for the poems that she read and shared with us. Thank you so much. So we want to thank Sophia for assisting with moderating. And we had facilitators, Annie, Jan, Beth, and Leslie. Thank you so much for your facilitation last month. And Catherine Phelps for our story time. And those of you who have elementary school children or grandchildren, consider tuning in and hearing story time. It's 5 o'clock on the same day that we have our community meetings. This is Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We were proud to have been a sponsor of the Asian Student Union cultural event that they held last month at Lake Oswego High School, but it was for the city, for both schools. Please join in the Asian Pacific Islander Cultural Festival on May 22nd at Millennium Park as we celebrate Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I told you about our mission, and now I'm going to share our agreements and our expected outcomes. Our agreements: be brave, share ideas, ask questions, and engage in the conversation. Let others speak. Respectfully listen to understand and be open to new ideas. Share your unique perspective and speak honestly. Critique ideas, not people. Ask clarifying questions. Respect each other's thinking and value their contributions. Honor confidentiality. Our expected outcomes for this evening is we'll get acquainted with who's in the room and wanting to respond to racism. We won't solve racism in 2 hours. You'll leave the meeting with more questions than you came with. You'll have one actionable item. That's our hope for you. You'll have more ideas of how you can interrupt racism.
Thank you, Willie. I guess I better put on my video. So I have the honor of doing something I don't normally do. I am going to ask everybody to come up with a word. What one word do you think of when you think of a white supremacist? And I want you to put your answer in the chat. So I'm going to leave you about a minute. Put your answers in the chat. Just think of a word. Thanks, everyone. We have a speaker tonight. His name is T.M. Garrett. T.M. Garrett is a public speaker. He's a human rights activist. He is a researcher of extremism, a radio personality, and much more. He has spoken at universities, at schools, in front of legislatures, and has been featured in national and international TV and print media. Mr. Garrett is the founder of Change or Be the Change, a nonprofit organization engaged in anti-racism and anti-violence work. Tonight, our guest will share the story of how he became radicalized and how he exited white supremacy. He'll talk about his work helping people exit extremism, as well as his prevention work with youth. He'll provide us an inside look into the humanity behind the curtain of hate and what we all can do. Please be advised that some of this content may be disturbing to hear. TM has had some trouble joining us. He's having a little trouble getting on the Zoom, so we can take some time to just look at the chat and your answers. What do you think about that, Willie? Maybe unmute yourself, Willie. And if my co-host will just kind of watch for when TM comes back in the room.
Okay, you had a good idea.
Yeah, do you want to read a couple of these, Willie?
Oh, okay.
And I can too, and Pat and John and Don can join in.
Ignorant. Fearful. Is that
misinformed?
Misguided.
Oops, sorry. Discourage.
Roadblock.
Hateful.
Rigid.
Violent.
Angry.
Unenlightened.
Scared.
Insecure.
Self-serving.
Misinformed.
Redneck.
Bigot.
Frightening. Angry.
White women.
Rigid.
There's a lot of hate.
Arrogant.
A lot of hate words in here.
Is TM back in?
I think I am.
Hi.
Hi, TM.
Hello.
I just introduced you. You missed it. I said all kinds of things. Now we're just looking at the chat, which you probably can't see, and we had inputted a bunch of words.
I do. I can see the chat.
Can you see
I
some
can
of it?
see two of the words in the chat, and I heard some of the words that come to some people's mind when they hear the term white supremacist.
Well, are you ready to go? We'll leave you here spotlighted.
I'm ready to go.
Thank you so much for coming.
Let's see if I can share my screen as well. Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It is actually the first Zoom meeting in 2 weeks that I'm doing. We had a little family tragedy that happened, and we're trying to get a little bit back to normal. So thank you that I'm still on. Really appreciate this. Let's just try to get the technical part figured out, and then go from there. Okay. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you, first of all, Trina, for inviting me. I remember when you contacted me a couple of months ago, introduced your group, and I actually crashed two of your meetings in the meantime. And it was actually really, really interesting because it is a lot different when we talk about the demographics, me being here outside of Memphis in North Mississippi in the South, and you're outside of Portland, Oregon, and the demographics are completely different. And I think this will also come into the whole discussion tonight as well. When I logged back in, I heard some of the words that came to y'all's mind when you hear the term white supremacist. And we could go on with other terms and whatever, neo-Nazi or Nazi, and I always say, who likes a Nazi, or anybody who doesn't hate a Nazi? I hope the hand doesn't go up in this case. And these are all strong, very strong words. And if we just look back in the last couple of years, what kind of hatred we have seen, what kind of bigotry, or what kind of people that are seemingly overnight are ready to physically harm maybe even their neighbors. And some of them we've seen them on TV. January 6th last year, Washington, D.C., in the Capitol. What happened, how willing they were to hurt those patriots, all of a sudden willing to hurt their fellow Americans. And I guarantee all of you have probably either a relative or a friend or maybe a spouse that changed seemingly overnight, had maybe weird ideas politically, drifted in a certain direction, or maybe COVID-19, there's a lot of radicalization there, that people seemingly overnight become very radical in their opinions, or just political. People become very, very extreme, or even extremists, seemingly overnight. And that's the people we don't want to invite for our next Thanksgiving dinner then. And we wonder what happened. We love these people and neighbors, friends, spouses, family members, people we know, and we have no idea what happened to them. And again, it happened overnight. And since I've seen this development, I'm starting my lecture with this because this is so current in all our lives, all the time, that I think we need to start there and see what happens. What happens when people start picking up extreme ideas, radical ideas, become racists overnight? And to try to get to the bottom of this question, I thought, let's pick an example to look at, to find out. And let's use the most extreme example we could find, that is myself. I used to be a white supremacist. I used to be a neo-Nazi skinhead musician, a KKK leader. And again, all these words that I heard when I came in, this is always the first response, of course, when you hear these words, bigot, racist, and it's a lot of, like you said, it's a lot of hard words and a lot of hate in there that you hear also speaking when you hear people speak about hate. It creates hate automatically because it's so easy to hate a racist. It's so easy to hate a Nazi. And I think almost nothing is easier to hate a Nazi or a racist because we know those people are wrong. It's so easy. So you introduced me, and a couple of people have seen probably the little flyer on the internet and everything, and probably have looked who's Team Garrett and have looked a little bit. And so you probably have the first question. Usually there's two questions when I start my lecture. The first question, how can somebody become radicalized? And again, I mentioned that already, it can happen to anybody. Because some people are born into an environment like that, and that wasn't the case for me. And the second question is probably over y'all's heads, big like a question mark, is can people change? And how do people change? What happens? These two questions are very closely connected to each other, and so are the answers. And to answer them, we have to really do a little bit of time traveling. I hope my presentation works for that. So we're going back in time to the year 1975 and to this little town in southern Germany. When I say little, I mean little. It's actually a village. You see just a couple houses. That's a current picture. It wasn't much smaller or bigger back then. That's it. There was nothing going on. Small, conservative, all white and German, all Protestant, the typical WASP village that you would have here in the US, actually. And my parents had just moved there a year prior to that. In 1974, they opened a small eatery with a bar in it. The problem was they were both alcoholics. That was not very good. And as newbies in the town, there was a very tight community, very conservative alcoholics. Then there were the only Catholics in town. They had a different dialect. And then on top of all these problems already, they divorced around the time I was born. So I was not a planned kid. See, I have three siblings. They are 13, 11, and 8 years older than I. You see, 13, 11, and 8. And then 8 year, nothing happens. Then TM happens. And I think that explains the situation really good because my mom and my dad were just in the middle of a divorce when I happened to them. And my mom had no idea what to do with me. All she needed was another child. Well, not. So I think her main mission was always just to get me through school so I can get a decent job and make it in life. I had no idea that she had her own demons to fight. And I was an outsider too. The whole family were outsiders, me too. And I always thought something is wrong with little TM. And let's go see little TM. Here we see how little TM looked like a normal kid, actually. Like to work on my bicycle and learn writing here. I got the chalkboard for Christmas. This is my sister's guitar, and you can see the Beatles in the background. I still love them, best band ever. And even the haircut fits. So, and I wanted to play the guitar so bad, but it seemed my mom didn't care. There was just no resources. She just couldn't provide these things. What she could provide was, again, getting me through school. So even though she had an alcohol problem, and by the time I was 6, my older sister moved out, she got married, my brother went to college, left me with my 11-year older sister and my mother, and without a father figure. And, you know, I always had over-the-top school supplies. I had always over-the-top school clothes. And let's look at the next picture. That's first day of school. And one thing, by the way, and I think you mentioned it, I see the chat here. If anybody has questions, put them in the chat. I may not answer immediately, but I will gather them there. And don't forget, don't keep your question because you may forget it later. And you can ask 2 questions, that is fine. I will answer them at the end if I haven't already answered them during what I'm saying anyway. So that is that. Back to this picture. So I'm smiling on the picture. the reason for that is probably that cone. And that cone that I'm holding there is a tradition in Germany. Every kid in school, day of school, is getting this cone. It's full of candy. At least it was in 1986 or 82 when I was the first day of school. Today it's probably like iPhones and stuff. But in my case, it was really candy. And I was ready to pop that cone. And that's probably the only reason why I was smiling. So why I probably shouldn't have smiled was, let's look at those pants. I said over-the-top school clothes, and that's what it was. The other kids had jeans and khakis. I had this. The other kids had polo shirts and like unicolor shirts. I had this. And to this day, I'm trying to figure out what's the pattern on that. I believe it's flowers or something. It was really embarrassing. And then again, the same haircuts and the glasses you get bullied for, okay? And that's the thing. I got bullied a lot. I didn't know why. I thought something is wrong with me. Little did I know that the other parents told their kids not to play with me because of my family's reputation. And I was a weird kid because, again, I loved the Beatles, I loved Elvis, and even though I didn't speak English at the time, I tried to sing Love Me Tender, and that is weird if you're not from Memphis. And at the time, I wasn't from Memphis. I didn't live there. Now I do. I was a weird kid. And again, I was bullied a lot. I was a perfect victim for bullies, the kid in the corner that you can push around. So fast forward a little bit, I tried to make it in school. I liked it, but I was bored. I was a good student, but a lazy student. So I think it was just, school wasn't for me. Okay, we're talking about the 80s. That was probably 86, 87. Well, I probably looked like Don Johnson in Miami Vice there. That was the wedding rehearsal of my sister's wedding. I remember that. Looks like a normal 12, 13-year-old boy. And then, seemingly overnight, I came home like this, with a shaved head, a flight jacket, and boots. And my mom must have thought, what happened to my son? I don't understand. Overnight, she didn't see it coming because, again, she was busy fighting her demons. But to her, like to all of us, with our relatives, with our friends, we didn't see it coming. It happened overnight. And all of a sudden, they came up with these weird ideas. And I had seen these weird ideas too. I love weird music and everything. But how did it come that far? Well, it did not happen overnight. It happened a little bit slower. Actually, age of 12 or 13 years old, when we learned in school about a topic that was the taboo in Germany. Like the skeleton in the closet that they wouldn't talk about unless it's for history, for education. You point out that it must never happen again. So everything that had to do with these guys here, with the Nazis, Hitler, with Holocaust and the Third Reich, you wouldn't talk about unless it is for education, period. So, and again, this topic was presented to us at the age of 13, when boys are in puberty, trying to discover their masculinity, trying to pick up anything that fits for them in the bad boy image. And so a couple of the older boys picked up this topic and started to crack jokes, racist jokes, homophobic jokes, Islamophobic jokes, and also Holocaust jokes, really bad Holocaust jokes. But they also cracked jokes about Hitler. And you have to understand, you couldn't make fun of Hitler at the time. Always compared with a Baptist church here in the US. You cannot make fun of the devil in a Baptist church. It's way too serious. You don't do it. And therefore, it's just the slide is blank. Sometimes the slide is black because I don't want to leave bad images on there too long. So if that bothers, I can stop the presentation for a couple minutes until I get to the next slide. But I don't want to leave swastikas and stuff there on for like 5 minutes. We've seen all this, and 5 seconds is enough, I think. So, and again, like in a Baptist church, it's too serious to make fun of the devil. You can't do it, so you couldn't make fun of Hitler. It's way too serious. The topic, Germans know what happened. They're very aware of this. And we got taught in school, yes, the Nazis were the bad guys. Yes, the Holocaust happened and everything that happened. And unfortunately, there was no money to go to concentration camps. Fortunately, they do that now. There's funds and everything. It gets financed. Unfortunately, at the time when you learned about it, not. The problem was I was a very good joke teller. Like I always liked arts. Again, I wanted to play the guitar. I liked to draw comics. I wrote short stories. I cracked jokes. I was very good at that. And I was always a little bit extreme and took things to the extreme, a little bit over the top. So I picked up these jokes as well, even created new jokes while the other kids started slowly dropping them. So they went back to normal at some point. And looking back, I always ask myself, well, what happened to them? Why did they go back to normal? Were they just smarter than I? Did their parents sit down and talk to them? And I figured out the reason was actually they had a normal to go back to. My normal was the bullied kid that you could push around, and for nothing in the world, I would have gone back. Say, okay. We're going to the next slide in just a second. So my normal would have been the bullied kid. For nothing in the world, I would have gone back to that. Well, one question to the host here. When the slide is black, you still can see a small picture of me in the corner, or am I completely gone?
We see you. I am an audience member.
So,
I see you.
Okay, wonderful, awesome. And therefore I ran with those jokes longer, unfortunately, and the other kids had that normal. Like, for example, one was a Boy Scout. The family was organized in the church. He was there. Another one, the father and the brother were in the army. He wanted to do that. He already knew that. Another one was into sports, like soccer, and tennis was big in the 80s in Germany. With their dads, they would watch it on TV or go to the matches and everything. I had none of this. I was just a bullied kid, and I didn't want to do that any longer. I wanted to be somebody. I was looking for attention. I was looking for a purpose, that sense of belonging that I just didn't know who I am, other than the bullied kid that had no reason to be there in this world. The problem was everybody started calling me the Nazi kid. So I felt like they're putting me in a box, like this box here, labeling it with it's the Nazi kid and closing it. I tried to stick my hand out and sort of, I am here as a human being. But again, who likes Nazis? I can ask you all right now here, and maybe everybody hands up who likes Nazis. And I hope I don't see any hands up. Okay, but you see the problem. So nobody likes Nazis. So there was a lot of finger pointing. Oh, that's the bad kid. Actually, we don't want the bad kid at school. Let's see if we can expel them from school, and so on and so on. And I felt like, well, if you need a helping hand, you can't grab a finger that doesn't work, literally, figuratively. So they put me on the shelf with a label, Nazi kid, and I didn't feel like a Nazi. Look, I thought the Nazis died in 1946. And I didn't know anything about skinheads or neo-Nazis. I didn't know that exists. And I was like, I'm making fun of Hitler. How can I be a Nazi? You see, I did something racist. I did something anti-Semitic, but not for the intent to hate. It was at that point only for the attention that I got for it. I just wanted to be the bad kid. Better than the bullied kid. So I have a couple slides that I'm going to skip that are not that important. So what happens if you're in that box? You breathe in that box. And you wait for somebody who recognizes you. And that happened to me when a boy in school gave me a cassette tape with skinhead music. You have to understand that all extremist groups are very good with dumbing down their message, actually, and soften it, and telling you a very soft version of the ideology packed in a subjective truth, a truth that is uniquely true to you, your personal truth. Because I didn't feel like a Nazi, but I started picking up these attributes from the far right already. Like, I'm proud to be a German. And it's not like here in the US where it's not that big of a deal if you're proud to be an American. In Germany, they are aware how quick it goes from being a patriot to be a nationalist, be a National Socialist, ending up in a genocide. They've been there. So they're very careful with things like, I'm proud to be a German, that puts it in the far right corner with the Nazis already. So, but that was my new identity. I'm a proud German, but I'm not a Nazi, because I'm making fun of Hitler too. And on this cassette tape, that's what they were singing. You're proud German, but they call you Nazi, but you're actually not. And I was like, wow, these guys are the only guys who understand me. Who are they? They know me without knowing me. How is that possible? I didn't know there was propaganda for recruiting people. It just resonated with me. It was my personal truth. That's how I felt. So, but the thing is, extremist groups are good at that, and they started raising the dose. And the dose, you know, when it's get raised, the message becomes more clear and more radical. The problem is that first, because they told the truth, that was my truth, which means they became my trusted source. It is like your parents. If I ask anybody or your kids, maybe, you trust your parents or your kids. Why? Because they've always been around. They always have told you the truth, probably. Even if they would tell you a lie now, you most likely would believe them because they haven't lied to you before. They are your trusted source. It's called the mere exposure effect. You're just exposed to these things all the time, and then you tend to believe them even though they're wrong. So the second tape that I got was a little bit harder. But hey, they said the truth on the first one, so this must be truth. So slowly the message got more radical. And there's one slide here. I show it often. It's the stages of radicalization. You see that white dot, that is me, and that got darker and darker and darker. And the red dot would be the hate crime. That is very, very often at the end of a career of a person in that movement. And I'm probably here at that second light gray dot with the hate music, very unintentional, just to provoke. But they were saying something at the beginning that was true. And I wanted to know who these guys are, these skinheads. I didn't know. But I found them at a county fair and I joined them. And this is how that looked. And this is all me on these pictures. And you see, I got myself a guitar. All of a sudden, I could play the guitar. And there were people all of a sudden that cared, not like my mother that I thought that didn't care. And I wrote all these lyrics, even some of these jokes I wrote, and so on. And they would cheer up to me because sometimes I would write even lyrics that were more radical than I, because I knew they want to hear that, and radicalized myself even then. And I played all over Europe and even in the US at the time, but I still lived in Germany at this time. That was about 1994, 1995, 1996. But it still was a lot about provocation. There was still little ideology behind it. It was just spewing out that message to get recognition and to provoke. This changed a little bit later. I got recruited in a neo-Nazi party. And you have to understand one thing, and I'll make this black for just to have a minute or so. You have to realize I was born in 1975, 30 years after the liberation of Auschwitz. And let's stop sharing real quick. 30 years after the liberation of Auschwitz. That means a lot of the grandparents, like my grandparents, part of them were still alive. Grandparents of my friends were still alive. And we just learned at the age of 13 in school about the Holocaust and the atrocities that happened, that were committed by Germans in World War II. And then, wasn't my great-grandfather also in the army in World War II? Wait a minute. What if? Then you have to ask yourself the question, if your beloved grandparents were maybe involved in some of these atrocities or in the Holocaust. And it's nothing any child, any teenager, or even an adult, I believe, wants to ask themselves. And I live here in the South. I see that often in white Southerners that were born, let's say, after 1970, they pushed this away because it was like, were my great-parents or great-grandparents maybe in the Klan did something bad? They don't know, but they might still be around them. And this is a question, it's really hard to face this. This neo-Nazi party had a very simple solution for this, because they were Holocaust deniers. They claimed the Holocaust didn't happen. They came up with all kinds of lies to prove it didn't happen, but that meant also, if it didn't happen, then there's no way my grandparents could have been involved with it, right? They also claimed Germany didn't start World War II, but everybody else pushed them into that, and Germany was only defending itself, which means all of a sudden my grandparents, not even all the possibility that there were criminals was gone. No, they were actually heroes defending their country. That sounds much better if your grandparents are heroes all of a sudden. For a 13-year-old, in that case, I was just around 20. Yeah, sounds better. And the whole problem was gone. They had that simple solution. And more ideology kicked in. Germany first. Immigrants are infiltrating the country. They want to swap out the population and want the Germans to be gone. That sounds all familiar. We heard that the last couple of years here in the US. Same rhetoric. And this is when the ideology kicked in. From the Holocaust joke cracking 13-year-olds to the provoking skinhead, all of a sudden I was a serious nationalist. This is when it became really serious with my ideology. And it went further. I even became a National Socialist. And then in 1998, I even joined these guys. Let's see. I think let's share the screen again. Okay. Here we go. So these are the guys you think actually when you hear about racists in the USA, the guys with the white hoods, right? So no, they exist in Germany too. Since the 1920s, hysterically, Hitler banned the KKK. He forbade it because he couldn't control them. He told them to join the Nazi party. And then they died. And in the 1960s, American GIs brought it back to Germany. Then it died again. And in the 80s, skinheads brought it back again to Germany. And ever since, 4 or 5 different KKK groups exist in Germany and all over Europe and in other countries as well. Fortunately, and for everybody to know, they're very small and not the brightest lights, which is fortunate, actually. I was recruited. I felt like, oh, wow, they want me. I don't even have to ask them. And I felt like they probably have this secret knowledge, like the Freemasons. And I heard, like in the US, there were people of influence in the KKK ones, like governors and judges and whatever. And I felt really excited and thought this is something exclusive. I had a rude awakening because actually they were just alcoholics and bed sheets, more or less, fortunately. But this was that. I quickly rose up to become one of the leaders, and we founded our own group about in the year 2000. But let's stay with the year 1998. Something changed radically here. And I've called 2 things. And it was the advent of the internet. The internet exploded in 1998. And of course, I had a computer. I always was like into computers and programming. And the one thing that changed here was there was chat rooms. And we could talk to people all across the world that thought like we did. And they would tell us, oh, we have also problems with black people. We have problems with communists and this and this. I was like, oh, wow. So it's not only Germany's under attack. They are all the white race is under attack. And so I became a white supremacist, from a neo-Nazi also to a white supremacist. Because, it's a white race. We have to defend the white race. But from whom? Not from the communists, not from black people, not from immigrants. So from whom? Defended from whom? Well, this is the second thing that changed with the internet. You have to understand, Germany has always done a great job when it comes to neo-Nazis and racism. They have very tough hate crime and hate speech laws, and you will go to prison if you deny the Holocaust. You will go to prison if you spread that propaganda and everything. And therefore, it was hard to get the literature. You had to smuggle it into Germany, but with the internet, that changed. One mouse click and you had it. And what they told me to read was a book called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And it's relatively unknown unless you're in the Jewish community. They've heard about it in school. But it is what you call today fake news. It was made up in Russia in 1903 by anti-Zionists and anti-Semites to stir hatred against Jews. And they made it look like it's the blueprint how the Jews want to take over the world. They're behind the media, they're behind the money. I was like, oh, that's why Hitler wanted to kill them. Now it makes sense. And the white race are the only ones standing between the Jews and world domination. It was like I found the holy grail. I was on the top of my career in that movement. And I was like, this is it. We have to get rid of the Jews and then everything will be good because then we can control everything. Wow. I felt like really I could be a superhero defending my people and actually everybody in the world from this seemingly overpowerful enemy. And again, which boy or which young man doesn't want to be a superhero? It's like in Lord of the Rings. You can defend Mordor, Middle Earth from Mordor, you know? I was like, yeah, I want to be a superhero. Give me a cape. Of course, I felt like I was doing that noble thing, defending it. I was like, I'm not hating anybody. I'm just defending my people. I just love my people. And I want to protect them. So I didn't know how Jews really looked like. We saw one picture like in elementary school, like cats or the keepers in a long black coat, and they eat gefilte fish all day long. That's what I thought. And the neo-Nazis told me they look like this. You see how dehumanizing this is? Like with the spider taking over the world or counting the money. These are characters from like the 90s and the 2000s. Down in the middle, the colored one that is from 1940 something from the Nazis. And the other one is a Muslim anti-Semitic character. But it's all the same picture. It's all the same dehumanizing. And this is actually what the Nazis did. They dehumanized the other, everybody who was against them, so people would be willing to commit violence against them because they didn't feel like they're human beings anymore. So back to this, you see that before. Now I was at the dark red spot. And the red spot is actually the hate crime. And I wasn't there yet, but some of my members could have been. And the police knocked at the door and I told you they did a great job making sure it must never happen again. And they told me, look, if one of your members is committing a violent crime, it's you going to prison. And I was like, no, we're telling our members not to commit any violent crimes. I'm sure they're not doing that because we tell them not to. And I thought we're good. Then it dawned on me. I was like, wait a minute. If we would be the hippies preaching peace and love, then there would be no need to tell our members not to commit violent crimes, right? So therefore, there must be a thinking error. Either we're just attracting those violent people, and why do? Probably because we are spreading a hateful and violent message. So we have to tell them not to commit a violent crime. So I started seeing that, and I was like, wait a minute. I do not have my members under control. Anybody of them could just go off like a time bomb, and I would be held responsible. I was scared to death. I was scared to go to prison. At the time, I had 3 kids, and I thought, if I go to prison, I'm not good for my kids. If I go to prison, I'm not good for what I stand for. I'll be useless. And also, I thought, and I still think that prison is a very scary place. So very selfishly, and just to avoid prison, I stepped down from all my leadership functions and I left the KKK and the movement. So I was like, yep, TM got it. Sounds great. He left the Klan. Everything is good. No, because in my head, I was still a racist. I was still an Islamophobe. I was still a homophobe. I was still an anti-Semite. Just leaving a hate group doesn't make you an anti-racist. It leaves you in your head exactly where you left. And that's where I was. The problem was I was still hanging around with those people a little bit because you have to understand, in these groups, you live in a bubble. And for the host, I hope I can make it in 45 minutes. If I get a little bit long, I try to really pack it. And, you have to understand, you live in a bubble. You listen to your own music only. You boycott other music. You boycott companies and food. You only have friends in that movement, and some make even their money exclusively in that movement. So did I. I sold computers. I repaired computers in that movement. And I had a merchandise for flags and other patches, all that stuff in music. So that's the main reason why I stayed, because I needed the money. But after a couple of months, I was like, the police could still think I'm behind everything. If something happens, I will still go to prison. Selfish again, we decided to move, me and my back then wife. And that was already hard because distancing ourselves a little bit from that. And I don't know if it's fair to compare to a woman in an abusive relationship, but the dynamics are a little bit the same. Well, let me explain why. A woman, mostly it's women in an abusive relationship. Not always, there was also men in abusive relationships, but let's say mostly it's women. Know that the relationship is toxic. but yet they stay. Why? The main reason is fear. Fear from the group, of course, but also fear of change. Because making this big change is scary. Will this world there outside, do they want me back after I stayed so long with this abuser? And I was in a relationship with an abusive relationship with a hate group. Will they want me back? Also, I would have to move to a new town, find new friends, maybe change my name, find a new job, and throw everything overboard I believed in for the last 15 years. It's all I was. For a long time, I didn't have this courage, but that was my fear to go to prison was bigger than the fear of this next step. Okay, so we canceled our lease and couldn't find anything. And a week before Christmas, and the lease was done then by the end of the year. The only apartment that was in the classifieds, I dialed the number, and the guy with the Turkish accent picks up the phone. And I was like, really? Are you kidding me? A Muslim immigrant owns the only apartment out there that's available. And I started lying to myself. And people in that movement do that a lot, because whenever you meet the black person that is okay, you know, and most of the part it's the only black person you met, and that's okay. And then you think, oh, well, that person is different from all the others. Or you meet the left-wing person, that person is okay. Oh, no, but that person is different from all the others. All the others are bad. Or you meet the immigrant, and then, no, but all the others are bad. This one is cool. Like Ahmed is cool. So you lie to yourself. And I lied to myself too. I was like, this is only temporary. I will find something else. Well, I didn't. I was stuck. And as bad as it sometimes is, it's also good. I found the picture of the actual house where I moved in. This is it. So you see the three windows at the top. This is the apartment on 2 levels that he rented. And he lived in the same house. Like the 4 windows over the garage, that's where he lived, the Turkish landlord. We shared the same hallway. And of course, when we moved in, he didn't know about my activities that I did before, but he knew we were running from something, and he knew we were all of a sudden on Section 8 housing and welfare, because all of a sudden I had lost all my income because I left these people. All my customers were gone, and he knew that. So to help a little bit out, he had this computer that kept breaking all the time. He offered that I can repair it, and he would pay me for that. You know, 6 months prior to that, I would never have put a foot in this house. And now I was sitting in his living room at his desk and repairing the computer. But I lied to myself, it's just work. And he paid me. I went upstairs. Next day, he knocks at the door. DM, computer broken. I said, okay, I go downstairs, repair the computer. He pays me, I go back upstairs. And it goes like that for a while until I tell him, dude, you need to get a new computer. I'm tired of this. And he got a new computer. And of course, he called me, computer is here, can you help? Of course, I went downstairs, we got it out of the box. And I swear to God, this is a true story. It didn't work. It was brand new. The master boot record was missing. I never heard the problem before, never after. I said, Himit, what was his name? I said, I have to go upstairs and I have to download something, and I will come back and I will put that master boot record on there. Okay, that was 2002. Okay, so I had a 56K modem, you know, the funny ones that sound like a fax machine, and it takes like 20 minutes to download 3 megabyte or 1.5 that fits on a floppy disk, and that's what I did. Put it on a floppy disk. So after 20 minutes, I came back downstairs. And he was like, well, if it took so long upstairs, it will take so long downstairs too. He must be hungry and thirsty. And put that Turkish tea, chai, and pancakes, Turkish pancakes, and offered it, eat. And I was like, oh, Lord. He touched it with his dirty Turkish fingers. And what did he put in the pancakes? Blood or something? Is he going to poison me or whatever? This is not even German. I don't want to eat it. I don't want to touch it. I didn't want it. But on the other hand, I also heard, in that culture, if you reject a generous offer of food, they might be horribly offended. And you know, you realize that this is 2002, 1 year after 9/11. I thought all Muslims are like Osama bin Laden and terrorists. And I was like, one time he will kill me in my sleep because he's a terrorist and they want to take over the country. And I was like, always in this mode, I will unmask him. I will prove he's an ugly Muslim, you know, and how bad he is. And I was like, man, I did something selfish again. I ate it and drank the tea. Why? Because I didn't want to find out how much he would be offended. Because still my landlord. I didn't want to get kicked out of the house or something. And you know what? It was really good. And I really liked it. The problem was his computer kept breaking. Every time I came downstairs, there it was. Turkish tea and pancakes. And at some point, I rejected the money because I finally found a job at a staffing company. It took a while because to find a good job, you need a good resume, right? And what would I put in my resume? What did you do the last 4 or 5 years? Leader of the KKK? No. So I didn't have a resume, which means no good job. But the staffing company didn't care. So I rejected the money. I just helped him repair. You see what's happening here? This unlikely friendship that's developing. And I wasn't aware of this. It was like 6 months. And then we're coming a little bit closer to the end. And then after these 6 months, he invites me downstairs for dinner. Not because something was broken, just for dinner. And I remember I went alone. I don't know why my ex-wife didn't go. We didn't have a babysitter. I can't remember. But I went alone. I said yes and sat in his kitchen. You know, his kitchen. This is where you invite friends and family for dinner. Not strangers or people you don't like. And I was still in warrior mode. I was like, I want to hate you. Why don't you hate me back? Come on, I hate Muslims. Hate me back. And he just didn't. I was so annoyed by this. Why he didn't hate me. And I thought he's hiding. I was like, I will unmask him. He's a Muslim terrorist and I will prove it. Well, I was there in his kitchen. His wife was there. His kids were there. They spoke barely any German. They had that weird TV channel on, like Turkish. And I was like, okay, what are they going to serve? Couscous and falafel, probably. I don't like this. So I always ask the question at this point, who likes fish soup here in the round? And usually I have like out of like 30 people, 1 out of 100 people, usually 3. So I was like, okay, you can feel my pain because I don't like fish soup either. It doesn't go down, period. And it's not even a Turkish thing. No idea why he served fish soup as an appetizer, but that's it. And it was there, like the pancakes in front of me. It was like a time bomb. It was ticking. And I was like, I need to tell him I don't like it. And I know he will be offended. I know he will turn into the ugly Muslim. And I thought, actually, that's good because then I can prove that he's a Muslim terrorist and he's just bad. It was there. Take notes. I was like, okay, Himmet, I don't like fish soup. And guess what happened? Nothing. His wife came, took the fish soup and brought the entree. And I was like, okay, here it comes. Couscous and falafel. Chicken and fries. I was like, are you kidding me? That is so normal. What happened to couscous and falafel? Like, looking back, who am I to tell him what is normal for him? Just because I thought I have nothing in common with him because he talks different, he prays different, he looks different. He has that accent. That means he can't eat the same things I do. So it can't be normal. But here it was, chicken and fries. Hold on, wait a minute. This is normal to him. And I thought about the last 6 months. I was like, that dude is worrying about his kids the same as I do, about mine. He worries about his family the same as I worried about mine. He's worried about this country he's living in the same as I do. He likes good music. He likes a good film. He likes to go out. He likes chicken and fries. He's just trying to make it. I can't hate this man. I just can't. The commonalities were just so much bigger that the things like the accent or his belief system were unimportant. Even that he was my landlord was not important anymore all of a sudden. I was like, okay, what is happening here? This is weird. All my hate was crumbled in front of me. And these crumbs, and I was like, ooh, what am I going to do? Either I could put them back together to the loaf of bread that I used to nurture, or I could analyze them because, you know, I wasn't sure what was happening in because what actually happened was, and that's like a little red thread through my whole story. Come on here. That was too far. Compassion and unconditional love. That's what he showed me. The compassion that I did not get as a child, that I did not get in school, that I thought I would get in the movement, but that compassion in that movement is so selective that it's so small. They like maybe the German Shepherd, and that's it. And the compassion that I received from one of the people I actually once hated at a time when I thought I didn't deserve it. Wow. And I was like, I have to find out about the other Muslims in Germany. Are they like him or are they bad? Are they like Osama bin Laden? Unfortunately, Germany has a big Muslim population. I got to know them. Guess what? They worry about their children the same as I do. They worry about their future the same as I do. Guess what? They like chicken and fries. They're just people. And my hate was just, okay, this is all wrong. I got it. I started really reading most other stuff and whatever. I got it. Okay. I realized the Holocaust did happen. No, black people are not bad. Immigrants are not bad. And this is all weird. I didn't believe in this anymore. But I was at a point like in this, I walked 10 miles into this dark forest of hate. And I was still a little bit in the middle. Now I had to walk out. Guess how long it takes when you're in the middle of this forest? How long does it take you to walk in 10 miles? Well, it takes you 10 miles to get out. So the change doesn't happen overnight. The same as it didn't happen overnight when I got in. So that happened very slowly. So for the next 10 years, I didn't even talk about my past. I just tried to make it in this society because I was afraid of rejection. Again, who likes Nazis? Hands up. I don't see any hands. So, okay, good. Nobody likes Nazis. It's easy to hate Nazis. Everybody hates Nazis. So, of course, I didn't tell people that I used to be a Nazi. Of course not. Like, those people I left behind, my old mates, they hated me. If I tell the society who I was, they will hate me too. So I keep it for myself for 10 years. And then I moved to the USA in 2012. Childhood dream. Long story short, I had an aunt in San Diego. It is like the American dream, and I just wanted to do it. And I just grabbed an opportunity. And we moved outside of Memphis, Tennessee. And Memphis, Tennessee has an African-American population of about 70%. And these are actually kids from Memphis. And guess what? They worry about their future the same as my kids worry about their future. Their parents worry about them. They worry about their country just as everybody else does. And guess what? They like chicken and fries. I was like, these are just kids. Their parents are just parents. They're just trying to make it. I can't hate these people. I can't. So, and much later, I got the opportunity to get to know the Jewish community. And this is at a yeshiva in New York in 2019, speaking to middle schoolers, or high school, I think it's high school. And I realized how diverse that community is, just as diverse as any other community. They have different denominations and so on and so on, different observant and so on and so on. I was like, they're just people. They worry about their country the same, about their future the same. And guess what? They also like chicken and fries. Maybe kosher, but it's, what? I was like, wow. And you see, not thinking about these commonalities, you only think you have nothing in common, which is out of ignorance. And this is what happens if you're there at this point. Ignorance, because you don't know better, and often you don't want to know better. That leads to fear. And fear, if it's recognized, easily leads to hate. And I often bring this example of a child that is afraid of the monster under the bed or in the closet. And we as parents, so I remember me as a child being afraid, but I also remember my children being afraid. So what do parents do with a situation when your children are afraid? You call them out, depending where you stand politically. Are you stupid? Have you seen that on Fox or CNN or wherever you stand? Or call them out or whatever? No, you know that it's not substantial. But the fear itself is real, right? It is real. Those kids are frightened. And what do you show as parents? Unconditional love and compassion. It's weird that we, at some point when kids grow up and become young adults, that we don't do that anymore and stop showing this compassion and the unconditional love. and recognize their fears. No, then we call them, they're stupid. This is not real. So anyway, so even the worst people, their hate is based on fear. My hate was based on fear. I woke up, I was afraid the race war is going to start. I was afraid the Jews are taking over the world. I was afraid the police is coming and kicking in the door and raiding my house. I was afraid of everything and everybody who was different from me. I was at war with the world every day, nonstop, and I took that fear and that hate to bed. This is not a happy life. It's stressful. It is bad. And you don't want it, actually. And you blame everybody else for this feeling, even though you do it yourself. You could fix it yourself, but blaming somebody else is always easier. Okay, before we wrap it up, I'm already over time, but am I okay?
You're okay.
Or is everybody running up?
You're not over time. You're good.
Okay. I'm trying to wrap it up. The last, let's say, give me another 10 minutes or so. But this is important for the whole story and for understanding what's happened. Because when I started speaking, and I remember in 2017 at a couple of local churches, and in 2018 with the Salomon Wiesenthal Center, and I always shared my story of change, and everybody thought this is already powerful to see how people can change, this compassion of one of the people we once hated, what kind of impact that can have, because that person humanized me. I let down my guards and started humanizing them and realized what is going on, how stupid my beliefs were. But I thought there must be more, but I didn't know. Every time something happened to my friends in minority communities, let's say when Elton Sterling was murdered in 2016, for example, I picked up the phone, and George Floyd just 2 years ago, I picked up the phone, called my Black friends. Are you guys okay? And I was really worried. Are you okay going out of the house? And I felt really genuinely sorry. And I felt empathy, but I couldn't walk in their shoes. When Christchurch happened, I called my Muslim friends. Are you guys okay? How do you feel? But I couldn't walk in their shoes. I wasn't a Muslim. Then when Pittsburgh happened, for example, or other attacks before, anti-Semitic attacks, I called my Jewish friends that I had then at that point. I said, are you guys okay? But guess what? I couldn't walk in their shoes. Even though I felt sorry, deeply sorry, I never felt what they felt. I wasn't Jewish. I wasn't Black. I wasn't Muslim. So 2018, the Dutch College at Chapman University made a film about me, flew me out for the screening to LA. You know, in LA, what do? You go to Hollywood, you go to the Santa Monica pier and put your feet in the sand, all that stuff. But there's also something where I recommend everybody to go if you go to LA. It's the Museum of Tolerance run by the Salomon Wiesenthal Center. Salomon Wiesenthal, a namesake, was a famous Nazi hunter. His thing was to hunt down all the real Nazis, bring them to justice. And they dedicated the museum to him. It's a Jewish organization. And I went there, and another former, we call other former white supremacists formers. So another former went there with me because she knew the senior researcher. We got the VIP tour. Usually it's classes full of kids or teachers. There was only 3 of us. And they had the Civil Rights exhibit, the brand new Anne Frank exhibit of the year, and the Holocaust exhibit. And you have to understand, like I said earlier, in school, I didn't go to a stop the screen sharing real quick. We didn't go to a concentration camp because there was no money. When I was in that movement, then I didn't go to a concentration camp because I was a Holocaust denier and felt like I don't want to see these lies. And later, when I was out of that movement, I didn't want to go because I was not a Holocaust denier anymore. I accepted it happened. And I felt like you do not have to prove it anymore. I believe it now. So you see how I pushed it away the whole time. And here I was in this exhibit. And you go at the end of the exhibit, they have like the Warsaw Ghetto. You walk through, and then you have 2 doors. And the one is for women and children, the other one for men. And behind that door is the same thing. It's a room called the Hall of Testimonies, and it's modeled after a gas chamber. It's like a concrete bunker, and it has a couple of TVs in there where Holocaust survivors are sharing their stories. And they dim the lights, so they make you feel like you're in a gas chamber there. And you watch these Holocaust survivors with their testimonies. And then at the end, you go out, and over the door is a sign saying, who's really responsible? And I walked out, and I was like, wow, never been to a concentration camp, but going through this, I felt so small. And I felt like I knew I was not an anti-Semite anymore. I knew the Holocaust happened, but I felt like I had never reflected on my past as an anti-Semite. Not really. Because I never talked to anybody who was Jewish about that, for example. Because in Germany, there's unfortunately many Jews left. Fortunately, it's getting bigger now because they have a lot of Jewish immigrants from Ukraine and from Russia and Eastern Europe. And then I met a couple business-wise, but you would never talk about being Jewish or not being Jewish. Those were the people I vilified the most. And I said to Rick, the senior researcher, I need to work with you guys. I need to do something. He was like, it's May, school is out for summer, but maybe we can go to colleges, you tell your story, and we have a couple of programs like that. So again, school was out for summer, and then September, they had a new campus director. Everything was slow. We tried to work things out. And then Pittsburgh happened. The Tree of Life Synagogue, and 11 Jews were murdered just because they were Jewish by a neo-Nazi. And they were like, okay, our new secret weapon, TM, you go. Within 3 days, I went to my first college lecture in Northeastern University in Boston. And it was mostly Jewish kids there, but I couldn't make any contact. It was like in and out. I had to fly back. 3 days later, Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina, organized by AEPI, which is a Jewish fraternity, and Hillel, which is also a student organization, and by the Sam Wiesenthal Center. And you know, the student leadership, they wanted to meet me and pick my brain the day before. So I came a day earlier. And again, this is in the South, North Carolina. And we met at this Southern restaurant. And I was like, Southern restaurant? I don't think they serve kosher. This is weird. I didn't understand. And then I sat down there, and it was about 10, 20 kids, and the campus director and I. And I was looking around, trying to figure out who looks Jewish. Looking back, it's what do you expect? Who looks Jewish? You know, I showed you that picture earlier with these horrible comics that the neo-Nazis did and the Nazis. And again, how do Jews look? And I remembered again the picture from elementary school here. Okay. Now let's go back to, am I still sharing the screen? I don't believe so. Let's go share it again. Okay. Go back to this picture here. Okay, there we go. The same picture I showed before. This is what we've been shown in like elementary school. This is how Jews look like. But none of these kids looked like that. And there was no gefilte fish on the table either. What's going on here? The one kid had red hair. The other one was black. I was like, how is that possible? Oh, the one had a Star of David. He must be Jewish. Like, I was looking for people who look Jewish, you know? What is wrong with me? And, well, I found out, well, the Jewish community is very diverse. And the black kid, well, his father was black and his mother was Jewish. So he was both. Easy. But I didn't know this is possible. And then I said, look, guys, I need to ask you a question. What the hell happened to kosher? Because what you're serving here, there's all kinds of stuff, but there's also ham and whatever. And they explained how diverse it is and that everybody keeps kosher and so on and so on. And most Jews don't even eat gefilte fish. And I was like, how many stereotypical things was I still believing in after like 13, 14 years out of that movement? 13, 14 years not being an anti-Semite anymore, but expecting these things. Ignorance, right? Ignorance, you don't know better, can create fear and can create hate. That's how cricket goes. And that's how they look. I just skipped it. We're almost at the end, so sorry. This is actually this year in Boston. They invited me back. It was my very first college. So the elderly man with the glasses, the Hillel director up there, he invited me for my first Hanukkah. I was there coincidentally during it. Then he invited me back to his house for Passover. And I was like, wow, I need to get to know more of that. I was fascinated with the Jewish community. They're so diverse. And the ethics, if you look at the Jewish ethics, that's absolute humanity. And I was like, they match up with my newfound ethics 100%. I was fascinated by that. And then I was like, okay, they come from religion, of course. But I didn't know too much about the religion, but what we learned. And I remember I was talking to the Sound Wiesenthal Center and said, you know, I know about Yom Kippur, for example, is the highest Jewish holiday. I want to explore this. Can you maybe set up something? And Allison of the Sound Wiesenthal Center up in Chicago said, TM, I'm Orthodox. I don't even drive on Shabbat. Why don't you go to a synagogue in Memphis and ask if you can participate? At the time, I didn't have any contact to the Jewish community in Memphis. And I was like, Allison, what do you want me to do? Go to the synagogue, knock at the door and tell them, hey, I'm the former Nazi. Can I come to Yom Kippur? Of course not. I thought maybe next year. Okay, let's see. Then I'm also very, very organized in the interfaith community. We had a big event in September 2019, just before Yom Kippur, and they invited a rabbi that I've never seen. I was the MC, and as the MC, it was not important about my past, so there was no mention. He didn't know anything about that. I woke up, introduced myself as a speaker against hate, as the MC for here, interfaith activist, and said, I would like to come to Yom Kippur and I'm exploring Judaism. Is it possible? Can I come to your synagogue? He gave me his card, said, let's talk. I go home and I realized, oops, I didn't tell him something very important. I need to tell him that before I come. So I texted him and said, look me up on the internet. If you're still okay, we're okay. And I'm almost through with my story. And then we can go to the Q&A. Sorry if that it takes so long. And I told him, and no answer. And I was like, I knew it. The people I vilified the most, and then a rabbi, he will turn his back on me. I knew it. And 2 days later, I finally received an answer that I can come. So what he did, he wrote to the Simon Wiesenthal Center and asked if I'm okay. And they gave me literally the kosher stamp. They said, TM is kosher. He's good. So he said, okay, you can come. So I went to Erev Yom Kippur, which is the night before, you know, for Jews, the day starts actually at the end of the day when the sun goes down. And that's the very first time I was at the synagogue for a different reason than to speak the whole lecture, really to participate in the service. And this was me that day before the service. You see, I'm wearing a kippah for the very first time in my life, nice suit and tie, and I got a transliteration so I can actually pray in Hebrew. It was a conservative synagogue. They pray, everything is in Hebrew. But you get a transliteration. So I tried. I think I did a good job, but I'm not a good judge for myself. After the service, and everybody knew, by the way, who I was. It was a super warm welcome. And I almost felt like coming home. After the service, somebody walks up and says, TM, tell us about anti-Semitism in Germany. And I was so proud, like I told you all before, Germany has done a great job making up for it, making sure it must never happen again. And I told them, I don't think there's any danger coming from Germans anymore. And I went home. And the next day I'm turning on the phone and see the news. And on the news, I see that a German neo-Nazi had attacked the synagogue in Halle in Germany. I felt betrayed and I felt like a liar. What have I told these people the night before? I lied to them. And at the same time, I felt so pardon my friends, it was so shitty, this feeling. Because it crawled up my back and I was like, wait a minute. I was sitting in there yesterday with this kippah on, praying in Hebrew. I made myself part of this community. I looked like a Jew. I prayed like a Jew. If anybody would have entered the synagogue to kill anybody who's inside just because they're Jewish, I would have been dead. I would have been one of the victims. And for the very first time in my life, I didn't just feel sorry. For the very first time in my life, I felt how it feels not to feel safe, because you're part of a minority group. All of a sudden, I knew how my Black friends felt when Elton Sterling got murdered, when George Floyd got murdered, how my Muslim friends felt when Christchurch happened. I was like, I felt helpless all of a sudden. Just as helpless as all these friends that never had an answer for them. And I was sitting here feeling helpless. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have an answer for myself. And every time I was speaking after that, the next 4 months, I would tell the story and tell them, hey, I do understand you now, but I still didn't have an answer. And now we're coming to closing my story. Finally, sorry that it took so long. 4 months later, just before COVID hit, I went to Chicago on a little speaking tour. And one event was organized by a rabbi. It was like a lunch meeting group with a couple of people, business people. And the rabbi asked me if he can tell a story before I talk. A story about a thing that happened just a week prior to that, about a young Jewish woman at the University of Michigan. And for those who are not familiar with Judaism, Jews have a little scroll with a Torah portion at the door, the mezuzah. And she also had one at the door of her dorm. And at the time, it was big in the news that a lot of anti-Semitic attacks happened. So she was a little bit aware anyway. And the mezuzah got stolen. And she was all of a sudden, okay, what's happening here? Is this personal? How intentional is this? Was this anti-Semitic? What is happening here? Reported it to the police. Fortunately, that had cameras. And they could identify the person who did it. It was a student who lived at the dorm, had a dorm on campus. So the police was already, that's probably a Nazi and anti-Semite. Probably better to kick him out of school, expel, let's talk. And ask the young woman if she wants to press charges against him because he needs to be punished, right? So, okay. So, and the young woman says no. And the police officer was like, what? That's a Nazi. We need to press charges. We need to make sure he gets expelled. Nobody wants Nazi at school, right? I said, no, I want to sit down and talk. So what? So they sat down with somebody from the ADL and the rabbi, and they figured out that he wasn't an anti-Semite. He knew the mezuzah was something Jewish, and if he steals that, he would hurt her personally. That's what he knew. That's all he knew. Understand that they had a long dialogue and understanding the extent of his doing. He apologized to her and gave her money to buy a new mezuzah and also pledged to go to do a tour of the Holocaust Museum. So she wanted to talk instead of pressing charges. See, remember when I showed you the picture with the boxes? Like I was in the box and was put on the shelf, the Nazi kid. And I did something anti-Semitic, I did something racist, but not for the sake of hating people. It was the sake of attention. I wanted attention, that's all I wanted. I didn't hate anybody at the time. It was just really being a bad kid. But I was breeding in the box until the Nazis pulled me out, recruited me. And this young man was already in the box. The police put him in the box, teachers put him in the box, did something anti-Semitic. Must be a Nazi, right? Let's expel him from school. And he would have been put on the shelf. And what happens here is that we have two things that we can do. Either we close it and put the label on it, put him on the shelf in this box, and wait until the guys with the white hoods and the swastikas are pulling him out. And then we lost him. Or we do what the young woman did. She opened the box, looked at that human being inside, because remember that arrow with the stage of radicalization? You don't see where he's at on the stage of radicalization because the box is closed. You don't even see that human being anymore. She pulled him out and put him back on track. That young woman maybe saved that young man from becoming the next synagogue shooter. And this is the great power we have. It's a short window when these people are vulnerable. And this is the only time when you can reach extremists, when they're vulnerable. Fortunately, they're vulnerable all the time when something happens. You just have to wait for this moment. Don't do that when they come to town. Don't do that in Portland when the Proud Boys come to town and when they were looking for trouble. That's because that's what these groups want. They want you to hate them back. This is what they're thriving off. One example before I close the whole thing, the leader of the NSM, the National Socialist Movement, Jeff Scoot, he was the leader for 25 years. He left the movement just a couple of years ago. I personally took him to a synagogue in Chicago. I personally introduced him to the Black community and so on and so on. And he told me the story. They once went to Mississippi, to Tupelo, to have a rally with a Klan. And Tupelo was smart because they didn't go to the rally. They plastered Tupelo with posters that they don't want the Nazis there. But the people stayed at home. They said, we don't give you a platform here. We're not listening to you. And going back, one of the members tells the leader, said, man, Jeff, this was the most boring rally ever. Why can't it be like last year in Philadelphia and we can smash like chairs on the heads of people that yell at us and throw things at us and hate us? But there was nobody. They did the only smart thing to do. Anyway, you see what's happening here. Those people, they thrive of you hating them back. And if you don't do that, it doesn't work. Like my Muslim landlord, he didn't hate me back. I was completely off track. I was in warrior mode. I was like, I'm a warrior. I hate you. Stop with your stupid hippie love. And this is exactly what happened. It's always compassion and love. So this is still a solution. We said 5 minutes, so I probably have 1 minute left. I talked about humanization. Before we get to the Q&A, very important because I'm from Germany and people ask me, so why could in Germany a whole population stand behind a genocide or look away? How did this happen? Do Germans have bad genetics or something, or what is it? I say, well, fortunately not, because I'm German. So, but it is, the Nazis were just very good dehumanizing people. Unfortunately, they were masters in that. Like the KKK dehumanized people, like Henry Ford dehumanized people, like all the politicians in the Jim Crow era dehumanized people. Like we all today, all of us are still dehumanizing people. The left dehumanizes the right and vice versa, calling each other racist and baby killer. And it's so much easier to hit the racist over the head, right, than Jeff, or hit the baby killer over the head than Jill, if you take the humanity away. And how quick this go, last story, you see I'm a storyteller, but it's the last thing before we get to the Q&A. Please allow me to share this. This year, before MLK Day, Friday before that Monday, I was invited to the Jewish school in Memphis to talk to all grades from class 3, 3rd grade, up to high school. And I talked to the middle schoolers, and I did an experiment. Like my who likes fish soup question. It was cauliflower. Who likes cauliflower? And the result was pretty much the same. Like three like cauliflower. And I picked one that liked cauliflower. I said, okay, what's your name? AJ. Okay. So AJ. Imagine everybody would start calling you cauliflower head from now on. Would you like that? I said, no, that is stupid. I don't like that. And his seating neighbor, who was apparently his friend, started calling him immediately out and started calling 3 or 4 times cauliflower head and started pushing him. Within a split of a second, I was able to dehumanize him, and he became physical within a split second to his best friend in front of the principal, in front of the rabbi, and in front of me. So I asked him, was it fun to push cauliflower head around? I said, yeah. So, but do you want to do that to AJ? No, actually not. And this is what dehumanization does. And I guarantee all of us, including me and all of you, in the last couple of years, we have used mock words to either classify the political opponent or politicians or other people we see, or just think it is funny. And I guarantee we all have done it. But this is where it can go. And just think of Germany from 1933 to 1945. This is how far it goes. We've seen it in this country with slavery, with the Native Americans, with the civil rights, how long it took and still takes. So, okay, I'm shutting up now. I'm closing here. It's compassion and humanization. And here's the Q&A. And I stop sharing my screen if it works. So let me see. Here's the chat. Oh, well, okay. Somebody likes cauliflower. That is good. Let me start. Somebody said, Lisa Helcom said QAnon is based on that book. Oh, like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Yeah, because it's the same. It often starts with that, and they bring in stuff like George Soros and whatever. It goes all the way back with the secret societies that are most likely led by the Jews, which is really interesting, actually, that these often, there's I call them unholy alliances that are sometimes created. We look at January 6th last year. You had, for example, a Holocaust denier. He had a T-shirt about the Holocaust in the crowd, and you had an Orthodox Jew in the crowd as well from New York. And what come two enemies in the same boat because they had the same goal that day. And it was the smallest common denominator for them. And there was ultra-nationalism and the stop the steal idea with the stolen election. That was their smallest common denominator. And all of a sudden, it didn't matter if the one is a Holocaust and the other one a Jew. So you have that often history that you say, okay, if your enemy is my enemy, then we're friends, at least for today. We deal with each other when we're taking care of the enemy. Somebody asked, and yeah, I was the leader of the clan group, and I was the leader of other groups as well. So I was top notch in Europe, and that's when I was really at the top when I signed off and told them I'm leaving the clan. Did other members of your organization come from similar background as yours? Jeremy Watson is asking that. And yes, I have a nonprofit organization called Change, and one of our projects we have is called Erasing the Hate. It's an exit program. We help people leave hate groups. So, because again, who likes Nazis? So if you think about leaving, who are you gonna talk to? Nobody likes you. And you're not gonna out there and talk to somebody who you know that doesn't like you. But I'm me and other people who have groups that are similar and organizations are very present in the media. Unfortunately, people can Google that are in the movement and can find people like me and reach out, and I can talk to them without judgment because I've been there. I do understand where they are without approving. I can show empathy, but not sympathy. These are two different things. I can love them as human beings, but not like them. So, and the background is very often trauma in the childhood, not always, but very often dysfunctional families. And it's always like the sense of belonging, wanting to be somebody, trying to figure out the purpose in the world. And then these groups are coming, they give you everything, all of this. Jihadist groups, for example, recruit exactly the same. And it's the same target group. Gangs, the same thing, just regular gangs. My best friend, for example, he used to be with the Bloods. He's a former gang member, now he's a pastor. He's African-American. And we talked about this, and he was like, look, our ways are exactly the same. How he got in the gang, how I got in the white power movement, how it was in there with codes, with secret language, with us against the other, and so on. And how he got out was similar too. And now we're working together. It is very interesting. All these groups, it's often a very similar background. Let me go further here.
TM,
okay, somebody asked, grown up in a small, yeah?
TM, there's a hand raised. Annie's hand is up.
Okay, where can I see this? It's not in the chat, it is.
She's on the screen.
Oh, here.
Did
okay.
you prefer that we put questions in the chat?
Yeah, you can put questions in the chat or raise the hand and just ask. I'm just the people who had the questions during my lecture, so they don't forget it. So I answer them now. But everybody feel free to ask just right away.
Okay. My question is twofold, if you please. I'm wondering if you could share your thoughts on the risks of white parents in particular not talking about racism with their kids, going with the idea that if they just don't use the N-word, they'll have a loving and okay family. And then similarly, then the prohibition in schools to have elementary, middle, high school students not hear anything about racism. We're not going to talk about it. It's not allowed. I would love to hear your particular take on those issues, if you please.
It's interesting. We talked about this yesterday. I was lecturing at a synagogue at Grand Rapids in Michigan. Somebody asked me too, what is the difference in Germany when it comes to questions like this and here in the US? And I said, in Germany, they talk about these things. Unfortunately, at the same time, like when puberty, it should start earlier, but they do still a pretty good job. And that is because, and I always say, because Germany got its ass kicked for what they did in the Holocaust and stuff. But also they started educating. I don't say re-educating, educating with the next generation after the war. Because what the Nazis did was not education. It was miseducation. So they started educating right with the next generation. If you look at this country and you look slavery, then emancipation, and then, yeah, sort of free, and you look at all the rights that African Americans didn't have, and partly, in my opinion, still not have. If we look at how white privilege works, and this is where this education is starting now, pushed really hard, and it has to be pushed really hard. And all these white people have a problem with it. They're like, oh, overnight everything is racist. They do not understand this because it has been okay for so long. And that's the problem, because the education process has not started. This is why everybody's so allergic when it comes to critical race theory that they don't want this in schools, because all of a sudden you want to show this to my children and make them feel bad. And this is probably where we have to, and I live in the South, and I highly enjoy talking to white people and tell them that they have white privilege and talk about this. And I'm really pushy there. And of course they say they don't have it. And of course they say, I'm not racist, because to them, a racist has a white hood and says the N-word, like you said. You know, you don't say the N-word, you don't hate black people, you're not racist. And you have tons of people here who were waving Confederate flags, who have no idea how hurtful it is to many, many people, just because to them it was normal, for their daddy it was normal. But when they tell to me, and I know many people like that, and they tell me, I do not wish harm to any black person, and they wouldn't have a problem if their son brings home a black girl. And there's many of them, I believe them, because I know them living here, but it doesn't mean they can't be racist just because they don't say the N-word, just because they don't wish any harm on black people. There's a lot of things, but just benefiting of the white privilege and not recognizing it, that is also, in my opinion, something racist. The big problem here is the discourse with white people, because, and being from Germany, there was a similar problem in the Holocaust. For some time, it was tried to hammer it into people and tell them like a collective guilt. And that is especially, again, like me, I was born 30 years after the liberation of Auschwitz. And I could have said, what do I have to do with the Holocaust? I wasn't there. It's not my fault. Don't put the blame on me. Don't make me ashamed I didn't do it. This is when I talk to white people and say, you've got it. And they're like, what? Say, white privilege. But stop. I know you don't believe in it. But the things, you were born with it. Everybody tells you have to be ashamed and feel guilty. Well, the secret is, I think that is wrong. Shaming is toxic. And it's toxic guilt. And they need to understand this. They didn't choose to have that white privilege. They were born with it. They're benefiting from it if they want or not. Okay? And they need to understand this, that they're not responsible for the past, but they're responsible whether they want to be aware for the future, what to do with this responsibility in the future. And again, I'm a storyteller. Just let me give you one good example. I used to shoot fireworks. I used to be a pyrotechnician. And two of the pyrotechnicians in there, one, Jonathan was white and Andre was black. Both worked at different schools in the IT department, had the same position. Andre was a little bit older, and they both had the same position as technicians in the fireworks company on the side. So pretty equal positions, just an age difference, and they were kind of buddies, okay? They would go drink or would go to a football game. They worked together on the side. And I talked to the white guy, and we talked about white privilege. He's also allergic. You can't say it. It was like, look at Andre. He's exactly where I stand. Why do I have an advantage as a white person? I say, see, this is the biggest problem. It's not about you having an advantage, because what you do is normal. That is normal, or should be normal to everybody. The thing that we need to talk about is the disadvantage Andre had because he's not white. Because you're 46 and he's 55, and it took him 10 years longer to get where you are. Why is that? So it's not your fault. It's systemic. It is still a leftover from the Jim Crow era, from the 1960s, it is still there, from redlining and so on and so on. And this is, I think, often politicians also and I'm left of the middle myself, so don't get me wrong, but very often politicians on the left do the same mistake what politicians on the right do. The further you drift, the more radical you are, and the less you think, unfortunately. And then you also don't think how language is used, how language is perceived, okay? And then you use, for example, defunding the police was one of these examples. It wasn't what it said, right? Nobody wanted to take all the money from the police and dissolve them. It was a very, very bad choice of words to describe a very good idea. But the right just took it and ran with the phrase and used only that. And there it is too, white privilege, and it's the default question, and also it's that it's their fault. And we have to have that understand. This is where it comes in with my story, that compassion. And it's hard to have this white person who rejects all this to show that compassion, because you feel like I could punch you in the face in this conversation, because they're so hard-headed and you can't convince them. And this is part of the problem. When two people get together with two contrary opinions, and the problem is they might even be true. Remember when I told you about the subjective truth? And y'all probably have heard of Neil deGrasse Tyson, the famous astrophysician, and he talks about objective truth and personal truth, etc. And it's the same thing. For example, we can talk about objective truth, something that is a fact. For example, we're in the same room and it's 72 degrees. We don't need to fight, the thermometer says it. But then you say it's cold and I say it's warm, because I'm sweating and you're freezing. So who of us two is lying? Seriously, who is lying? We both are not lying. We both are saying the truth, even though we have two completely contrary opinions on something. So, and therefore, the person you're talking to, who might be there on the right, or the white person, they didn't do anything wrong in their opinion, because they didn't cause the problem. They were born with a white privilege. They didn't choose it. They didn't do nothing. That's part of the problem. They didn't do anything. But that's also their truth. I didn't do anything. And then you come, or I come, or whoever, with a hammer and try to beat it into them and convince them I'm right and you're wrong. Their defense shield goes up and they will not listen. Because if you get defensive, you're not listening either. It's like if you have a spouse and your spouse is doing that to you. Well, your defense shield is going up. At the end, you get up, you yell at each other, and you walk away and get a divorce. And this is what happens. And I heard that often. The biggest problems before we go to the next question are, and I heard the one thing often, I tried to sit down with them, but it didn't work. I tried to talk sense into them. It didn't work. And there's two problems in this already. You only try to talk sense into them without trying to listen. What about their fears? Their fears are real. What is their personal truth? The subjective truth that somebody fed them that was true to them. And once you listen to them, their guard goes down and they will think, that libtard is different. I've never seen the liberal listen to me. She's different than all the other libtards. Sorry to use this word, but that's what they say. And all of a sudden he listens. All of a sudden he will listen to what you have to say too. And the other thing before we continue is, and we all have heard it, like in context of January 6th or QAnon or Trump or people who change, it's always, oh, it's too little, too late. We all have heard it. And everybody says, oh, now after a year they're coming, that's too little, too late. But again, if somebody walks into this forest of hate, 10 miles long, and they're in there, they got radicalized in QAnon or from Trump or whatever for 4 years, 5 years. And then after a year, they start having the courage to speak out against it and just change a little and do something that is absolutely natural and normal, because scientifically, our brains get hardwired. It's neural pathways that are built. I would rather believe him than a person that changes overnight. And it's never too little. It's never too late, because if it was, I wouldn't be here today talking to y'all. So, okay, next question.
TM, Cheryl has her hand up.
Okay.
Yes, I was just going to say, when I was in Israel, in Jerusalem, or actually in Haifa, some years ago, as talking about white privilege, everyone, there were always, guards checking people's bags and backpacks and everything. And they took one look at me and they said, yeah, go on through, whatever. I was going into a store or some type. But I mean, that was a perfect example of white privilege right there. They didn't even check my bag. But also, I had put in the chat, my dad was in World War II. He was among the GIs who walked through some of the, Dachau, one of the death camps in Germany. And he never talked about it for a long time. And this is a little bit off the subject, I guess, but he said, don't ever let anyone tell you that didn't happen, because it happened, because people they're deniers. And I've always remembered that. He told me, I can't even think about it without crying, about what he saw. And because he was there when Hitler was when Germany had been, declared defeated. And he said, he walked through the Dachau death camp. And he said, I'm getting old. I don't want you to ever let anyone tell you that didn't happen, because it did, because he saw it. So anyway, that's kind of a sidebar, I guess.
While we're there, there's a similar, and I try to make it really short, good example of white privilege, and happened actually with the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Chicago. They had a meeting.
3 minutes, TM, 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. Then let's go to the next question. I think we all have seen what white privilege is. Okay, as you see, somebody asked about my family and wife and older sister, where they were. My ex-wife now, she was in the movement too, stayed longer in the movement. That was part of the reason why we divorced, not only, but it was part of it. They did agree with my changes. My family applauded my changes, but were still angry at me for being there in the first place. It took me, for me and my brother, for example, 16 years to reconnect. Unfortunately, we're all connected now. And by the way, my mother, she's sober for almost 20 years now, and I'm very, very proud of her. Somebody asked if I read the book Writing Out of Hate, Awakening of a Former White Nationalist. I do not, but you say there's a lot of similarities. And somebody else asked if there's similarities between my story and other people who are in the movement don't get out. And yes.
It's actually
very, very common.
It's actually writing out of hatred. Rising out of hatred, not writing out of hatred. But I think I think you would find it very interesting, because it really is the story of how one white nationalist saw his way out, and actually became, like you are, an advocate for the opposite. So it's a very good book written by Eli Saslow, was actually an Oregonian, but yeah, very good.
Okay.
That's rising.
Yeah, maybe Trina, can you send that to me later, because I have nothing to write here and the chat will probably gone. So that would be great, so I can look the book up. That would be awesome.
Yeah, Trina, it should be rising too, not writing. Okay.
I hear you.
Okay.
TM, we're going to need those action items.
Action items?
Yeah, I sent you an action item there. What are we supposed to do with all the stuff you told us? I want to fix something.
Hold on. Yeah, if something slipped my mind, we fix it in just a second.
That's all right.
But again, you know what happened in the last 2 weeks, so it was a little.
Yeah. Randy, thanks for spotlighting me. Now I have to be on camera. I think I put it in the chat for you, TM.
Okay. Let me go all the way down here.
I just put it just to you.
Oh.
We have to leave folks with something.
Only Cheryl. No, I can't see it. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. That is usually at the end anyway. No, actually a call to action, and actually two of them. What we can do, and it's 2 pledges actually, and the one is brand new, and the other one was new, was not new, but is new again because of COVID. The first one is called Share a Meal Pledge, and let me try to explain the background why this is important. When I got in touch with especially the Black community and here members of the white community, and I realized how little crossover there actually is. You know, this Hollywood picture of the white cop and the black cop and their best friends and the kids play in the backyard, that doesn't exist here. I don't know how it is in other parts of the country, but here you have a little bit crossover, but for the most part it isn't. And I realized, well, I have Hispanic friends, but I've never been to their house and had dinner. I don't know how they bring their kids to bed. How does my best friend bring his kids to bed? Do they read the same books to their kids? I don't know. Why am I not there? Are we really friends? And then I asked, and I made it also a passion to ask white and black people if they have white and black friends. And when they say yes, and I asked them, okay, as a black person, for example, how often have your white friends been at your house eating dinner last year? And last year is a bad example with COVID. So I created that just when COVID started. And the answer is always 0. I said, well, stop calling them your friends. The same with white people that have black friends. How often have they been at your house? Their classmates, their teammates, their co-workers. You maybe go with them to a bar. They may be your buddy. But if they're not worth breaking bread with you, stop calling them your friends. Why don't you invite them to your house for dinner? Wait, like the Muslim landlord invited me, where you invite family and friends. If they're not worth it, don't do it. And the idea was to create, and it's a local thing that should be done, a database where families can sign up and open their kitchen once a month, twice a year, once a year. They can decide, open their kitchen and invite other people that also in the database who want to contribute. You have to be really open and talk to people and go to minorities and tell them about the idea and join the pledge and invite them to your house and go back and have an exchange. Get to know the culture and really go home and see how they bring their kids to bed. Don't meet them at church. Don't do any soccer game or whatever, because you don't have anything that's personal. You need the personal connection. And this is breaking bread. And this is one thing we can do. So this is one thing that I always encourage people, do that. It's called Share the Meal Pledge. Take it, I don't own it. Take it, use it. It works. I have some communities, they're doing that now. It works great. The second thing we can do, and we talked, I believe I mentioned him before, Daryl Davis. He's an African-American blues and boogie-woogie musician, about 62 years old, and he befriends KKK members. And so far, about 200 of them, and has pulled them out of the Klan. They left the Klan because of him. And he's a very dear friend of mine. He's great. And he always talks about what I do too, that showing compassion, get to know the other. And he uses the term walking across the cafeteria. And me speaking at a lot of campuses realized how fitting this is. Seeing high schools, you see high schools, there's the black kids, there's the white kids, there's the Hispanic kids, there's the Asian kids. They're all at their own table, willingly chosen, segregated. Nobody told them to, because that is their common denominator. This looks like me, that's where I'm gonna sit, right? This is what we have in common. That's the most visible commonality. So I asked Daryl if I can use it and create the walk across the cafeteria pledge. And we all can use this and choose one person. Each of you choose one person, encourage your kids to do the same in school and walk really across the cafeteria. If you're a teacher, I give you a great idea that we discussed yesterday what you can do. Just pick somebody, like the person I talked earlier where I said with a Proud Boy. You can talk to a Proud Boy, not when they come to town to make trouble. Pick a moment they're vulnerable. Sit down and pick. Tell them, I want to know. And do it not only once. And don't have the goal with converting them. It won't work. It's like in a relationship. It won't work. You will divorce. Listen. Just listen, and you will realize, oh, the libtard is different, right? And all of a sudden, you both will realize, he will realize that you worry about this country just as much as he does. And you realize, oh, they're patriots too. How can that be? I thought they're libtards. You know what I mean? And you will see the commonalities all of a sudden. And this is when people start listening. This is when you can have real discourse. And for educators, you can do the walk across the cafeteria pledge. You can take it bigger in a school, for example, change it, make an experiment, and have little signs on a table and have a different commonality than the obvious, like race, for example, or religion, and put maybe some other activity that they might like, or everybody who likes, I don't know, pot roast, or anybody who likes cauliflower, anybody who likes soccer, or whatever, and put that and see who sits at the table and tell them, don't sit where you usually sit, sit where your activity is, and see who will sit at the table. And all of a sudden you have 2 black kids, 2 white kids, 2 Asian kids, and so on, and maybe 2 Jewish kids. They sit at the same table because they have commonalities that they didn't think about because they thought they had nothing in common. So this is a really great idea, how you can push them without actually pushing them. Because if you push kids, they will go against you, what you do. Make it a game, make it interesting, and they will start talking about commonalities, and all of a sudden they will make friends amongst the other. So these are 2 things that we can do in a community. And a third thing I can say is also interfaith work is really, really good too. There's only one thing you have to be careful when you do interfaith work. We tried it in Chattanooga, and they tried clergy swap, where the rabbi went to the synagogue and the imam came to the church, and the pastor went to the synagogue and to the mosque and so on, or to the Hindu temple. But the problem there was that the congregation always stayed where they belonged to. They never followed. It was only the clergy. And it was great in the mosque. Oh, the rabbi is coming. Or at the church, oh, the imam is coming. I learned something. But the congregation members stayed. So it has to be, it is how do you make church, or how do you make religion interesting for somebody who's usually not going to worship? Create a community activity. And based on that, all of a sudden they will be interested. So create a community activity where you can include congregation members from the synagogue, from the mosque, for example. So you can include them as well. That can work as well. So actually 3 good examples where all of us can do something. And also, if you don't have any black friends, go and make them. It is hard. One more example. I'm a member of the NAACP. And just before I joined the NAACP, I was talking to one of the members, and he didn't know about my past. But the local president did. And he mentioned somewhere, oh, the dude who was in the KKK now talks to black people. And he meant Daryl Davis. But the other guy heard about that. And he said to me, oh, I would like to talk to somebody who used to be in the KKK. And I was like, well, that is easy. I'm here. And he was like, what? So I said, well, I am a former white supremacist. And I told him about it. And when we had a really good talk, and I asked him, do you have white friends? And he said, no. And I said, how comes? I said, well, I live here in the Black community. It's Holly Springs in Mississippi, where I.W. Wells is from. And the Black population is 80%. So it's really high. And he said, I grew up in the Black community. I went to a pretty much all Black school because there's 2 schools and they're really, unfortunately, nobody did it, but it just happened. They're really segregated. And he said, I don't know how to make white friends. And this is the part. I don't know how to make white friends. And for white people, it's the same. I don't know how to make Black friends. What do you do? And I think it was you, Trina, or somebody else who said, look at the demographics of where you live, where you really have to, where it's predominantly white. And yes, you have to actively go there and look, where are Black people active, where are Asian people active, where are Jewish people active, or whatever it is, Hindu people from wherever that are different from you, and actively go there and seek conversations. Unfortunately, it cannot happen organically until we make it organically. And somebody has to make the start, and that start is not organically. We have to push it. And this is why we are the activists. This is why we are going out and take the first step and do it. But we have to do it. It's hard. You have to go and talk to the random Black person, maybe on the street. Do you have 5 minutes? And they wonder why. And I learned that I'm doing that. I really, I'm talking a lot. You all realized it already. I can talk 2 more hours if you let me, but I won't. But I do that. I really go to random people sometimes, and I'm random like that, and tell them, hey, do you have 5 minutes? And I want to talk to you about this and that. Greatest conversations, greatest context, greatest ideas. This is what we have to do if we are the activists. If we want to be the role models for the next generation, the next generation is doing a great job anyway. It's like, I believe we're already way behind there anyway, but we still have to keep on that fight, because if the next generation is doing a great job, is seeing that we're giving up, they might. So we can't. We must not.
Thank you so much, TM. That was awesome. We're going to put another poll up. Please, everybody, show TM your love in the chat. Thank you so much for coming. We have a poll because, y'all have to do a little bit of work. Put the poll up, John. I also want to remind you that we have a book group starting, The Inner Workings of Racial Justice. I think we talked about it before. Randy, could you put that in the chat also? We have a sign-up link for that.
Okay, and I need to apologize. I dropped the ball because of the events that happened. I need to put you in touch with Dr. Todd Allen of Messiah University because of the book project. And he would probably be a great speaker as well.
Thank you, TM.
Will email me, please, and I will reply with an answer to you and Todd.
All right. Thank you so much for coming. I hope we see you again.
Thank you.
Is the poll still going? Everybody done? It's really late. Thank you all for coming.
I don't think the Google link is working for the registration for that book, but I could be wrong. Maybe somebody else is not experiencing what I am.
Yeah, it worked and then it stopped working. I just tried it.
Oh, yeah, it could be that maybe it's not linked all the way. Could that be it? It's just the first part, yeah. Part of it's hyperlinked and the other part's not. So maybe maybe that's it.
That's what it is. I'll fix it.
Thank you, Randy.
It is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and there's a festival May 22nd at Millennium Plaza from 12 to 3. Please join us. LO for Love, Respond to Racism. We're all going to be there. There are some resources at the LO Library for this month and some movies on Canopy. There are also applications still ongoing for our boards and commissions recruitment at the city. That is also an action item. Thank you everybody for coming. Really appreciate having you.
Trina, what's the date for the Asian American Pacific Island? What's the date for that? This coming Sunday or?
May 22nd.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Love to you all. Take care.